Hey guys, and welcome back to Karate Over Coffee. I'm Cheyne McMahon, and I've been talking with Joe Swift. So we're jumping into part two, talking about Matsumura. Enjoy.
But Bushi Matsumura wasn't concerned with self-defense. Nobody's going to attack him. They're going to attack the guy standing behind him, the king. Bushi Matsumura's job is to, just like any modern bodyguard, keep his eyes on the horizon for any suspicious activity and stop it before it starts. Which is where I think his Jigenryu instincts kicked into how he interpreted karate.
Yep.
We know that Jigenryu has been in Okinawa longer than Bushi Matsumura.
Yep.
We have physical documentation of this. But I think that he was late enough into the game, yet early enough into the game, that his generation was probably the one that, I don't want to say perfected, but perfected Okinawa Te by melding the concepts of Japanese battlefield martial arts and the Chinese kung fu forms. So that it's not either, it's something new, and it's something that could probably have only been created in Okinawa due to the historical circumstances of needing a response that has the speed and brutality and the ability to work at long and close distances as swordsmanship, but without a sword. Now, I'm going to go off onto a little bit of a tangent here with the Chinese side. We know from Funakoshi's writings and the oral traditions and everything, well, we know what they told us anyway, that the majority, if not all, of the Chinese kung fu influence was through military attaches that came to Okinawa with the Chinese envoys, or the military attaches that were guarding the Okinawan compound in Fujian, China. Now, Krav Maga being the exception that proves the rule, civilian self-defense and military empty-hand fighting are not the same.
Yep.
If you're a military man and you're doing empty-hand forms, it means that you've dropped your weapon or it was broken, and you need that last resort weapon in your toolbox to take down the guy in front of you and pick up a new weapon. Now, imagine feudal era Chinese and Japanese armor. You don't want to punch and kick somebody wearing that stuff.
Yep.
So I would imagine that the seminal Chinese arts, I'm talking pre-Meiji, okay, pre-Higom no Kandyo and all that, arts of China would have probably have been basic training forms for what I'll term battlefield sumo.
Yep.
So you need to root and tense up for that instant so that you don't get knocked down because you're wearing heavy armor, right? And knock the guy down, by grabbing his helmet and turning him over, right? Then you pick up his weapon and stab him and join the fray again.
Yep.
If you're a bodyguard who needs to stop a marauder on an assassin before he actually even gets his initial attack off, you don't want to wait until the guy moves and grabs you.
Yep.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And so if the Chinese forms in the early area, like the Kushanku and all that from 1750s were military style training, then I would imagine that they would have been mainly a grappling and wrestling style art, and things that look like kicks are actually like, throws over your leg or something like that, and things like that. But that is for the battlefield when you're wearing armor and you dropped your weapon, and the guy is either like coming at you with his sword like that, or he's dropped his weapon and you're in a bit of a clinch.
Yep.
Right. That does not lead itself to the concept of being in time to cut off the attack before it starts, that you would need as a a member of the King's Secret Service, or the Okinawan version of the Kingsman.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
This is all a hypothesis, of course. There's
Sure.
the only thing that we have to go on is the kata and the new/old evidence that we have in front of us that there was a stronger Japanese Koryu martial arts influence than anyone had either admitted or known before.
Well, one of the I keep hearing is the Makiwara is from the Jigenryu style, bang 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 bang. They've just adapted it to striking.
Yeah, to the fist.
Yeah, but I haven't actually seen any proof or evidence.
No, that's one of those pesky oral traditions.
Yep.
But you also don't see the Makiwara as it is in Kung Fu.
Mm.
And if the Kung Fu that the military was learning was more for battlefield style armored grappling, they wouldn't need to smack the fist against a piece of wood to strengthen it, because they were trying to grab the guy's helmet and throw him on the ground so that he has a hard time standing back up. Then you pick up his spear and do him and move on. But the Makiwara, as formulated from the Jigenryu, they call it the Tategeuchi, right? It's a wooden pole that you just whack with your wooden sword over and over again. And there's actually two forms of Jigenryu, two major forms. The two major forms.
Oh, okay.
But there are four schools that are called Jigenryu.
Ah, okay, yep.
And two of them were an offshoot of the main one.
Okay.
Yeah. But the actual Jigenryu from the Togo family use the standing thing to whack.
Yep.
And the one used by the we'll call them the working poor samurai of rural Satsuma, they call Nodachi Jigenryu. They use a really, really long sword, and they run, and they cut down everything in their path. They would train by taking a bunch of branches and putting them horizontally. Mm-hmm. And they would use that as their Makiwara style training.
Okay.
So if the Makiwara came from Jigenryu and it was an invention of Bushi Matsumura or somebody of his lineage before him, then that would indicate that the version of Jigenryu that was being practiced amongst the Okinawan gentry was the main line of Jigenryu, because they're using the vertical post. Speculation, but there's no documentation that the Makiwara actually came from Jigenryu, but we can make an educated guess that is a possible source of it.
Yeah. Okay. And the footwork as well in the Jigenryu.
The footwork depends on the kata, of course, but most Japanese sword that I've seen uses very similar footwork in the fact that you don't set and then cut, but you're cutting as your foot is on the way down. In many of the kata, and Jigenryu is no exception. In my viewing of the videos, anyway, I've never actually trained Jigenryu yet. That is a yet.
Yeah.
But you got to, man. Come on. Well, I have to anyway.
Yeah.
Even for a weekend crash course or something, I'll go down to Satsuma and take the blood oath that I won't use Jigenryu to fight against another sword style,
Yeah.
And in a personal duel or anything like that. But
well, you never know.
You never know. Yeah.
And with that, the striking and the stepping rather than the setting and then the striking.
Yeah.
In modern karate, it's set and strike.
Yeah. And that goes back to that thing we saw, right? The simplification of the movements through either design or necessity, like trying to understand the body as a piston engine when the body is not a solid piston engine. Right. Probably started not, I'm guessing here, not as a conscious choice, but that's just how people were moving now. And they were learning through their Western sport that you plant your foot on the ground before you hit the ball.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. And that just became part and parcel of the human movement patterns in modern Japanese and Okinawan society. Good, bad, or indifferent, it doesn't matter unless you're trying to understand how the martial arts were practiced in the 1750s.
Yep.
Rather than what everybody calls the old school karate from the 1950s. Yeah.
Well, that's a good lead in for my next question. I mean, we could talk about the biomechanics in karate and for a long time. And actually, that when I was coming to see you, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
The biomechanics, or the different biomechanics from what Kinjo Sensei teaches and Adekaki Sensei teaches compared to the modern style.
Yeah.
But how do you differentiate between? I mean, everybody wants to classify everything as traditional karate or modern karate, sports karate, classical karate. How do you? Where do you draw the line?
I don't think that we can really draw the line in a historical timeline type of thing. Maybe you draw the line at the purpose that karate is being trained for. Classical karate, I would imagine, is the Bushi Matsumura line. The guys who actually needed it in their day-to-day jobs, not necessarily as a personal defense or restraining techniques, like you would need in law enforcement, but the guys who needed it to protect their king and their castle.
Yep.
Against, not that ever actually really happened that I'm aware of, but the training would have been geared towards that. Then if we look at, we can say that traditional karate is anything JKF and full contact karate is anything Kyokushin. That's what they do in Japan. Traditional karate Bento-ha is your non-contact JKF style.
Yep.
That's what they call traditional karate. But when we get a little bit later in the timeline, and there are different needs for having a kind of martial skill, i.e. the warrior class is now the way of the dodo. People from all walks of life are being conscripted in the army, not just a special class of people whose job it was to fight, but everybody. And, repeating guns and, all of that basically made the classical martial arts kind of obsolete in terms of their original functions, right? But you can still take those same movement ideas and principles and kind of rework them so that they can become a form of civilian self-defense.
Yep.
And that's where I see the Goju prototype that Higaonna Kanryo was teaching coming in. Because he went to China in the 1870s, which is, during this whole big upheaval, China's having its own problems. The Ryukyukan in Fujian had basically ceased to function in its original, local government office building / warehouse for tributary, presents to the Chinese emperor, to a place where pro-Chinese, anti-Japanese Okinawans would gather and, badmouth the Japanese, basically.
Yeah.
So when he was there, need to rewind a little bit. In the 1700s and early to mid 1800s, we know that the Ryukyukan was guarded, for lack of a better word, by a Han Chinese military unit called the Green Standards Army.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the offices were run by scholars, Chinese scholars. So, and China funded the whole thing. And I would imagine that if there was any kung fu exchange going on between the Okinawan guys who were sent to China on short trips to, say, in the Ryukyukan or whatever, these were, for lack of a better word, military type guys, right? Peiching class. So some of them did have the functionality of a paramilitary unit. And they would have probably been stuck on campus, so to speak, all day working with a strict curfew of nightfall.
Mm.
And the Ryukyukan was purposefully built outside of the walls of the main city to avoid your accidental spy, right?
Yep.
So if we look at it from that perspective, then the best bet for kung fu exchange from the Chinese would have been Bob the security guard.
Yeah, right.
Who was a military guy, and he taught you a few rudimentary forms that he learned in part of his basic training.
Yeah.
Right. And then by the time Higao Nakanyo was over there, of course, the Green Standard Army was no longer to be seen. But I do think that we had the remnants of the martial arts school founded by the Kojo family in the Ryukyukan, where I actually think that they weren't the teachers, but they hired the security guys to teach kung fu classes, and they learned along. And then when everything's in great upheaval in the later 1800s, that the Kojo family was teaching a civilianized version of the old military forms, i.e., instead of having a metaphor like you spread your arms as if you're a crane taking off, it's now imagine you're a crane taking off.
Yeah.
But of course that is still just a metaphorical thing because people aren't birds and we can't fight like birds.
Yep.
Or tigers or snakes. But the image in your mind, to use that imagery, would have been probably a metaphor in the old pragmatic military days. Now takes on a whole new meaning. If to my knowledge, no military spends 10 years on hand-to-hand combat, or 20 years or 30 years to master hand-to-hand combat, right? But if you're a deposed military guy, or you learn some stuff from a military guy, but you're teaching guys who are not military anymore, and because they want to learn kung fu to defend themselves, you're gonna, and you teach them how you learned. They're gonna be gone in 6 months, and you don't have students left to pay the rent. What do? You drag it out.
Yeah.
You add more forms. You add qigong breathing exercises that were never there, or if they were there, then they weren't used on the battlefield, of course. And you say, "Oh, you must be with me for 10 years before I teach you the secret pressure point and movements and all that." But of course, the guys going to learn kung fu in the 1870s to 1880s were doing it more of a personal protection type of ideal. Because there's no more warrior class. They're not going to go back and fight for the king, right? But because things are in upheaval in China, in Okinawa, in Japan, there's more instances of interpersonal violence that your average samurai or your average Peiching would not really have had to worry about too much because if you're going to attack a samurai, that's inviting a sharp sword to the midsection. And I don't think anybody was dumb enough to do that.
Yeah.
Unless it was another samurai who was there to kill him.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So got way off on a tangent, but
What was the-
classical karate, Jigen Ryu influenced Kung Fu reinterpretation, otherwise known as Okinawa Te.
Mm.
Traditional karate, anything in a white gi.
Mm.
And I'm just making that up, but modern, depends on what you mean. Modern karate, I would probably put in the competition side. Not necessarily. Of course, we call Itosu the father of modern karate, because it was under his direction that karate was modernized into a different beast from what it had been, both purposefully and just through accident of history. The loss of the physicality of the education of the samurai class that was preparing in a certain way the body to be able to do the martial arts.
Well, on just
riding
on,
your horse, walking with a sword in your belt, things like this, will make you they'll make you understand your body in a different way than people who drive to work and have a Colt 45 at their hip.
Yeah. Well, I suppose they'll create their own kata, but
traditional karate, I say that the majority of what's done, or for what I've seen done in Okinawa, I would say that yes, that has a tradition of at least 100 years, right? Goju and its prototypes. Goju was 1930. Hey, in a decade, Goju will be 100 years old.
Yep.
And then what was there before that formed the tradition of Goju, right? I would classify that as traditional karate, even if it's not what I see as classical karate.
Yep.
Yeah. So I mean,
if we're talking about classical karate and Matsumura, is his philosophies, principles, ideas, are they almost dead and buried?
I think that to a certain extent, the Itosu guys have retained some of them, especially Kinjo Sensei with the footwork aspect and speed.
Yep.
Because Bushi Matsumura was known to have said that the warrior respects what he called divine speed.
Yep.
And divine speed in Japanese martial arts means fast enough to meet the timing that they call setsuna, which is a Buddhist term for a very, very, very short period of time. And some math wizard figured it out that the Buddhist unit of time known as the setsuna is equal to 1/75th of a second.
Okay.
That's fast.
That's pretty quick.
Yeah. And you don't get that way by doing sanchin in heavy armor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, but then again, sanchin wasn't designed for that. It was designed to not be knocked on your rear end in battle when you're wearing heavy armor, by rooting and tensing up for that split second so that you can evade the guy's throw, like the modern judo guys do.
Yep.
Yeah, or the sambo guys or the wrestlers. And there's one school that claims direct lineage to Matsumura. That's the Shorin-ryu of Soken Hohan. I'm not sure if all of their kata are directly from Matsumura. Like, I don't see Matsumura as actually having done a white crane form. Or some of these other things that are usually attributed to other schools, like Shinto and all of that jazz. But they do have some interesting things. They are also big on speed. Their Pasai opens up with a front cross instead of a rear cross on the foot. So
Yes,
your left foot steps in front of your right foot instead of behind it.
there was a branch in Queensland. I don't think they're
Yeah.
here anymore. But yeah,
Yeah.
I did see that.
And we're gonna go out into outer space here for a second, but we know the interpretation of the cross step in Pasai from Kinjo Sensei is whack him and then you throw him.
Yeah.
Right, you throw him behind you. If you're a bodyguard for the king, are you going to throw your opponent towards your king?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, but if you are doing you go and bang, you grab the guy by his throat or his beard or whatever, and you grab his top knot and you turn him over. As you step your left foot in front of your right foot, you're effectively building a wall between him and your king, and his head's facing that way.
Yep.
So that it does make technical sense that having a front cross instead of a rear cross for that particular movement in that particular context makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we're going on another tangent here, but is there too much bunkai? And I hate using that term, but everybody knows that term. Is there too many interpretations of one movement? My father and I had a discussion about this as well, and the same idea about the amount of kata. I mean, how can anybody realistically remember 40 kata, for example, over a 30-year period, 40, 50-year period? If you're trying to remember what you did 30 years ago, I can't remember what I did last week when I'm teaching the kata. I mean, the same ideas with the applications of bunkai or oil, however you want to classify it. There's only one way to, when somebody punches your face, there might be a couple of ways depending on what they're doing.
Yeah.
But it can't be 55 applications for a downward block.
Oh, 75, but
75, yeah.
Sorry. The author of that book and I have the same birthday, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, not year, but month and day. Anyway, I would say that if we are going to be looking at karate from the cultural standpoint and the idea of kata in the Japanese culture, you don't interpret or you don't have 75 interpretations of the tea ceremony. You have one, because that's the kata and that's what it is. Now, that doesn't mean that like little things don't change here and there. Like, I'll even go out on a limb in saying that changing from a closed fist to an open hand isn't even changing the kata, because the kata resides in how the body itself is moved in the combative context, not what's happening out here at the fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that regard, I would imagine that if you're a swordsman or you have sword training, and we know that Japanese sword kata is always two-person kata. There's no such thing as a solo kata, except in the iaido. But even then, they have the two-person version of it that you do with wooden swords, so that you get the combative thing. And then you use your live blade for your solo kata. But anyway, if that is your cultural reference of a kata, and you are revamping a kung fu form to fit your particular needs as an Okinawan who has this job description, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that you had a very specific application in mind for that entire kata, because that's just what kata is in the Japanese sense. Now, that doesn't mean that, say I'm being attacked, or I have to stop a guy using the first move, Naihanchi. I reach out, bam, grab his throat, stop him in his tracks, grab around behind his head. I try to pull him into the elbow, but he resists, so I have to punch him.
Mm-hmm.
That's not changing the kata or the application. That's the combative context that Funakoshi was talking about in whatever rule he wrote in his 20 rules, where the kata doesn't change, but the context of the combative situation may change, so that you're using the same principles of movement. Like, to me, the beginning of an elbow strike and the beginning of a punch are the same.
Mm.
You either keep your elbow bent or you extend your fist out. Bang. I'm talking about just the initial oomph that starts the engine of the movement. And so, bang, bang, he resists, so I couldn't pull him down, so I had to punch him.
Yep.
So that kind of thing we can call the oyo. But the function of the kata, in this case, if we're going to take this interpretation as correct for the time being, the guy moves forward, bam, slam him in the throat, stop him in his tracks. Works every time,
Yep.
unless you miss, right? Then you cup his head and you pull him into your move. The principles of pulling the guy into your move don't change if you're hitting with the fist or the elbow.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that's not changing the bunkai or the thing. It's just you had to extend the hand out rather than keeping it bent.
Yep.
Does that make any sense?
Yeah, totally.
So, but saying, down block against a front kick from the inside, down block against a front kick from the outside, down block against a midsection punch from the inside, from the outside. None of those are different if you're using it as a block, right?
Yep.
And I don't think how do I say this without people pulling out their Japanese dictionaries and saying I'm wrong? Yes, uke does not mean block, but that's the context in which it is often used in karate and other martial arts. But not blocking as in, the static jodan uke, but jamming the punch like you see the boxers do.
Yeah.
Right? The same thing, Bing. And in Japanese, that would be called an uke, even in boxing.
Yep.
So, I'm not a fan of the uke doesn't mean block interpretation, even though it literally doesn't. But that's the context in which it is often used. Now, that same movement, was it originally meant to be used in a defensive capability?
Your cat.
No. That's not Gogan. That's the other guy. We got two cats.
When you said that, one of my Nidan members, he's got a chicken called Chuki Motobu.
Ah, cool.
Yeah. So when I heard your cat, I thought, oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I wanted to call my son Chucky.
Who?
My son. I wanted to call him.
You call your son what?
Chucky, as in Chucky Motobu.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
My wife obviously wouldn't, let.
No, yeah.
I said, okay, well, we have a dog. Let me call the dog that, and she still said no.
No.
Anyway.
Can't win for losing, huh? But the movement that does this or that does this or that does this, the only question that remains is, was that originally meant to be used in the defensive capacity, or is it something else?
Yep.
And the only thing we can do in that thing is come up with the reinterpretation that makes sense based on whatever field of study we're looking at. If we're looking at modern interpersonal self-defense, then things like the arm lock from below or whatever would make sense in some respects. If we're looking at it from the point of view of the bujutsu, the martial arts aspect of Bushi Matsumura and guys before him along that particular line, I would imagine that they weren't concerned with locking the guy's joint, because if you've got a joint lock on somebody and he's still standing, you haven't done anything. He can sacrifice that limb and still use the other three limbs and gravity to drive into you.
Yep.
So if you're going to lock a guy's joint, you want to either break it in half or make sure the guy's flat on the ground when you're done with it. Not like keeping up here
Yeah.
and saying, that hurts, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it only hurts, right?
Yeah, he's not tapping out.
It only hurts, yeah. And he's not tapping out because he's got a dagger in his other hand that he was going to use to kill your king, and he's going to be using that on you. Which is another thing, getting into its technical things. If we're looking at the kata from the martial arts point of view and not the self-defense point of view, a grab to your wrist or your lapel or your hair or your neck or your elbow or whatever is usually going to be followed very shortly, if not at the same time, as a knife to your ribs or a short sword or whatever, right?
Yep.
The grab to your top knot from behind, he's not going to stand there and let you do your jujitsu on him. He's already got his short sword across your throat.
Yeah.
Right? The same thing with a pugilistic or a striking type of attack at the outside of the kata. How do they put it? One sword guy said that their kata always starts from the moment that the guy's sword is already here. And that's the intensity at which you have to train your kata, because that's what you're going to be facing if you get a sucker punch with a samurai sword, or if you get a sucker punch on the street down in Queensland.
Yeah.
You're not going to see it coming until it's already on your face, right?
Actually, in your Itosu book, you were I think Kinjo was talking about the sequence of the kata, and I think it's ni san, and how it sort of evolved into number 2 is down block, number 3 is punch, number 4 instead of that idea of the sword being on your throat and and having that intensity. And maybe we've lost that intensity when we're practicing our kata.
I think that doing kata to cadence is probably a modern thing, of course, because you got 50 kids and you got your teacher up on the podium in front of them, so like each, ni, sam, right? They're doing the kata. But I think that particular version of karate wasn't, as we know, being trained to that particular end.
Yeah, that purpose. Right?
Yeah. And I think that kata always has been, always was, always will be a solo endeavor. Because my current understanding is that kata should not have breaks in the flow.
Yep.
Once you start bing, 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 all the way to the end, you don't stop and pose for the judges, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of which, I see that move in Seibai as you've got the guy by the top and bottom of his head, and you're dropping your front foot, you're removing your front foot from the ground, and you're falling as you're turning your hands over. So you're using gravity and his weight on his neck to throw him. Yeah. That's just my personal idea on that, but that's not a very nice thing to do in kumite.
Depends on your opponent. Those guys.
Yeah. But the intensity of the intensity of the initial contact in the kata.
Yeah.
I think that we could learn a lot from watching the Katori Shinto-ryu guys do their sword kata. Just in terms of intensity and the ideas behind how a kata works in the Japanese martial traditions.
In that, we've gone off so many tangents, but the self-defense versus the combat. I mean, if you look at a lot of kata applications, bunkai, it's when somebody has already grabbed you, seized you, instead of the principles of looking and striking first.
I think that getting back to the intensity side, I think that the original intent of the kata training was to already be in that position of being killed.
Mm.
Basically you're being sucker punched.
Yep. Yep.
You don't see it coming, and you have to go, oh crap.
Yep.
Who's that guy? The spear system. Tony Blauer. Flinch response.
Mm-hmm.
You just look him up. His whole system is based on, and you're gonna love this.
Yeah.
The beginning of Kusanku. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's all 90-degree angles and everything, because that's your strongest, and that's what all of the movements in the kata,
Yeah.
Are showing. I think the structural soundness of what the move is based on what you're supposed to be doing with that move originally, but we don't know what that is anymore.
I wonder
and so we're stuck with
I wonder what his retention rate is though, because you could only teach that for a certain amount of time before you start creating other movements for grabbing this way, and then all of a sudden we've got 15 kata.
Well, all I know of him is that he does seminars for law enforcement and military type things, and they just need a quick bing bing bong.
Yeah.
And then it's all about training the flinch response forward instead of backwards.
Yeah. Well,
so I don't think that he has a dojo where he has his fifth dan student and all of that.
Yeah.
I think he did what I think Japanese culture was always very good at, whittling things down to their very essence.
Yep.
And getting rid of everything extraneous, so that you can just focus on the essence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean that's the evolution of karate. But the evolution of the filling your class with Sanbon Kumite, for example.
Yeah.
And the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Well,
Patrick McCarthy put it this way once. He said, if you look at a Chinese painting, a classical Chinese painting, you got the mountain here, you got the river here, you got the village here, you got everything. Everything's filled in. And it's very busy and intricate. Look at a classical Japanese painting. 3 lines with your brush on a white piece of paper.
Yep.
Right. And to me, I think the ideal of karate in that respect is the minimalist approach. So, to use, how to get the maximum effect out of the minimum input. Not training input, but the minimum amount of movement to get the maximum effect. And I think that is one of the things, other than the combative application side of kata, that kata is designed to do. We'll take a kata like, Itosu's Basai Dai.
Mm-hmm.
How many different movements are there actually in that kata? Not a whole lot, right?
Yeah, it's repetition.
And Pingan Nidan, for example. That's repetition on both sides of the body, up and down, bing, bing, bong. And I think that somebody put it to me once, that it's like a hurdle racer. The guy who does 100-meter hurdle jumps, 400 meter, whatever it is, right? The length between the hurdles, no matter where you go in the world, is going to be the same. The height of the hurdles is always going to be the same. And that's why you're able to run as fast as you can down that thing. Now, you want to mess somebody up. You make a hurdle 3 centimeters taller, or move it, 5 centimeters closer than the standard, and you're going to mess them up. And they said the minimalist nature of the karate kata, in one respect, could be to help you build those brain synapses for the speed at which you need your combat to be. If you're talking about, down a dirty, bloody, nasty, combat. And so, you know, Pian Nidan is, I think, the perfect exercise for as a speed drill, or even Taikyoku, right? Taikyoku Shonan.
Yep.
Do it as a speed drill. No stops. No stops. Do as fast as you can, right? And then do it faster and do it faster, because you don't have to think about the moves anymore once you got the kata. So it's like the hurdle racer. He doesn't have to think about the hurdles. His job now is to run as fast as he can along that race, and that might be one of the benefits, other than, of course, the combative application aspect of kata, and using it as a solar representation of same, could be in as a speed drill type of thing, because you don't have to think about it after you've done Pian Nidan for 50 times in a row. You got it. Now
Well,
just do it.
Mitani Sensei always talks about he teaches kumite based on Pian Nidan.
Yeah.
Just that go forward and that repetition again and again and again.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Makes sense.
Bing and bong.
Bing and bong.
Bing, 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 bong. Bing. Sorry.
Mate, just wanted to wrap it up with any upcoming. I spoke to you earlier about some upcoming projects that you've got. You must have a lot.
I've got 4 on the burners now, and they're all on low heat, so nothing's boiling yet. One is because I'm not traveling 3 hours a day.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing is I had so much fun doing this, and I found so much stuff that was just there that nobody had, people had seen it, and Andreas Quast already had all of it as well. But like the old newspaper articles, I want to take my little book I did on Nahate and redo it as a tribute to Higao no Kandyo in the lines of this. Mm-hmm. If I can find period newspaper articles about Higao no Kandyo. No, like articles published just after his death and things like that, or when he first opened his dojo. If the articles are out there, I'll find them. If not, so that's just kind of a dream that I have to flesh that out.
I think what makes the Itosu book fantastic is the articles at the end. Like the last third of the book is just very entertaining and gives you a real snapshot and idea of the times and the characters of humanizing Itosu and Azator and
all those guys
less of a cult, or like a movie star, and more as an average person.
Yeah, an average person of his times.
Of his times, of course. Yeah.
That's just what they did.
Yeah. And as you wrote in that book, you've got to understand this is this is what happened in these times.
Yeah. We can't put on our puritanical blinders.
Yep.
That and the self-righteousness of 2020. I think it was 2018 when this came out, but anyway, 2019, whatever. We can't, and that's not fair that's not a fair way to judge these characters. Is right. So that's one. Another one, I did a little booklet a few years ago that I called Satsuma Bushido.
Yep, got it at home.
And it's got the Iroha poem of basically the founder of the Shimazu clan, right? For lack of a better word. I found that there is a Ryukyuin Iroha poem that was written by a guy named Nago Uekata, and his Chinese style name was Tei Junsoku.
Okay.
You might recognize him as the guy that Nagamine quotes in Essence of Okinawa Karate-do that says, no matter your skill in academic endeavors and martial arts, what really matters is how you present yourself in daily life. That guy?
Yep.
That particular thing is part of his Iroha poem. So I want to do a little booklet on that. There's nothing in there about martial arts, and I'll put that in there. That particular poem doesn't say anything about the martial arts. It was a misinterpretation of the kanji te in there.
Okay.
But the original thing is it Teisumi Gakumon. And Teisumi Gakumon is written with the kanji for hand.
Yep.
The kanji for ink, like you use for calligraphy.
Behind me?
Yep. That kanji. The kanji for ink, like you use for calligraphy, Chinese calligraphy. And then the two kanji that mean like academic studies, Gakumon. And I will put details into that book if it ever comes out. That Teisumi Gakumon is actually an Okinawan compound word that literally means academic studies. Mm-hmm. And I'll throw like resources at it, like, you know, classical Ryukyuan poems using the same words, and, you know, Ryukyuan folk music using the same word in their lyrics, and none of them are talking about karate. Misinterpretation of the kanji te.
How well do you reckon that'll be received?
I would imagine that they're going to say, yeah, that's what we've been saying all along. It doesn't mean karate. But anyway, yeah, because Teisumi Gakumun it's a classical word used in poetry and Ryukyuan music to represent, you know, academic studies. Mm. Just because it has the kanji for te in it doesn't make it automatically related to martial arts.
Yeah.
So I want to do that, and then 1933 Karate Kempo.
Yep.
550-page book with, even in the blown-up edition that I have, like the enlarged edition, the kanji are still so small you need a microscope to read them. So that's going to take forever and a day. And then I want to republish my very first translation with an updated translation and extra stuff by a mentor of mine who has passed away, a guy named Matsuo Sensei, a Motoburyu guy. Originally Motoburyu, Shitoryu, then you learn Motoburyu from Uehara Sensei, but anyway, they parted ways and all of that, but that's beside the point. I want to redo that and then put all the proceeds to his widow and his dojo. So
that's very nice.
That's probably the one that I'm going to keep putting on the high priority list.
Okay. Yeah. Where can we find all of your books? Is it Lulu?
Lulu.com, or some of them, the paperback editions of a couple of the books you can find on Amazon. Search for Joe Swift and then whatever karate keyword you're looking for. If you just search for Joe Swift, you'll get a British gardener.
Okay.
Because he's got a lot of books about gardening.
Yeah. Because he's the average Joe.
He is.
And
actually, wait. No, he's not average.
Above average.
He's outstanding in his field.
Outstanding in his field, just like yourself.
No, he's a gardener. He's outstanding in his field.
Nice.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And if anybody finds themselves in Tokyo, shoot me a message on Facebook. And if we don't get to train, at least I can help you harden your liver with awamori.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was actually looking. I was looking more forward to connecting with you than being in the Olympics, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many days I would have gone to the Olympics. But
are your tickets going to be good for next year?
I haven't even checked, mate, to be honest. But
I think they will be if you've already got them.
Yeah. But I've already cleared it with my wife, so I'm definitely coming to Japan again next year.
Yeah.
So
cool. Hopefully, we won't have COVID-21.
Yeah. Could be 20. Yeah. Just a roll.
Yeah, it could be just a holdover. Yeah.
Yeah. And last question, mate.
Yeah.
What's the secret of karate?
Hard work and passion.
Fair enough. hard work and passion.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So guys, yeah, if you want to catch up with Joe, you can find him on the Facebook.
Yep.
Look, I highly recommend his books. For us, the guys who've been training with us, definitely the Itorsi book. We call it our Bible of our karate. So, but yeah, thanks again, Joe. We'll have to catch up again, because there's so many more things to talk about.
I know we have a lot of tangents that we could still go on or expand on other ones. Yeah.
Yeah. We might even catch up next week.
All right, cool.
Right.
Give my best to your father.
I will, yep.
Because we were close on the internet many years ago when he was still active on the karate message boards. So yeah.
The shorter journal, I think he created, and if it wasn't for yourself, we wouldn't have met Matani Sensei and followed that Sentoku Kai path. So thanks very much, Joe. And
thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for listening, guys. Hope you enjoyed the discussion. We've got part 3 and part 4 coming in a little bit later. But if you enjoyed it, make sure you jump on and give us a like or a review. We'd love it. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, make sure you do that as well. Send me an email, karateovercoffee@gmail.com. Otherwise, I'll see you on the next one.